Not everyone understands house music. It's a spiritual thing, a body thing, a soul thing, a soul thing.
Hi, thanks for listening to the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have a new guest on my show who you have not met yet. It's Iden Crockett. Iden is in Ohio and has a fantastic story that I'm really excited to share with you. So welcome to the show, Iden.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So Iden is a 46-year-old trans artist, writer, parent of 3. She had a career as a firefighter, paramedic. We're going to go through that whole thing. There's a lot we're going to go through today. So sit back and enjoy the podcast.
It's been a wild ride.
So tell me first, you're a parent of 3.
Yes.
And how old are your children?
My oldest is 15, nearly 16. My middle kid just turns 13 in a few days, and then my youngest is 11 and a half.
Cool. And what was their reaction whenever they found out that you wanted to transition?
So it's funny because it's been a little more than it's been right around 5 years since I came out and started transition, and they, especially my older kid, knew at least as much about trans people as I did, maybe more. And we had sort of, because I came out sort of as soon as I realized what was going on. And so we took a few days and sort of read some books with them and everything. And then I told them that I was trans, and their reaction was, I was ready for it to be something big, sit down, and guys, I got something to tell you.
Yeah.
I told them, and they were all like, okay. And I said, so do you have any questions? Are you worried? And they were like, can we play Xbox? And I was like, sure, I guess,
Isn't
yeah.
it crazy how kids are just so different from whenever, we were growing up? I mean, whenever I was in that age, high school or junior high, if somebody would have even come out as gay, let alone trans, it would have been like the end of they probably would not have survived.
Absolutely. And I was very worried that my kids would be, subject to bullying or being ostracized or something for having a transgender parent. And it has been totally the opposite. Is that not only has that not happened to them, but they have then become a safe space for other kids coming out.
Yeah.
And, kids in their generation, at least in the sort of small liberal bubble that we have here in this part of Ohio, I feel like every day their friends have a new name and new pronouns and all of this. And I sometimes have a hard time knowing how many people they're actually talking about because the names are different all of the time, I feel.
Yeah. My cousin's now son is transgender, but he has changed his name. His original name was Zuri, and that was what her name was born with. Then she had another name, but now I can't remember what the other name was. And now it's Lou. And so, but there was a couple of changes, like you were saying, and he, I'm sorry, is 13 or 14 now. So, he had to go through like finding the right name and stuff. And so,
and I love it. I love that at least this group of kids that I'm observing is so able to roll with changes in names and pronouns and to just do it and to make it look like it's not a big deal at all, because it really isn't.
Yeah. Because it's not hurting anyone, right? I mean,
it really doesn't. And maybe you slip up or whatever, but everyone does, like, all of the time, and you just say oops and correct yourself and move on. And it's not something that you have to be embarrassed about. The people aren't embarrassed to have changed their name, and it's like, it really isn't a big deal. And especially these younger kids that, they're not medically transitioned. It's just a social transition. And someone using he, him pronouns may look very, very feminine still. And but they don't care. And
Well, Lou
why
is still
should they?
wearing dresses once in a while, and it's
Mhm.
still, I mean, he's definitely, from what my aunt tells me, is more going towards. Well, no, I can't say that Lou is going towards being. I think it's back and forth. It's more leaning towards a male gender, but I don't know. Luckily, my family is very open and they don't care. Like you can be whoever you want to be. And so the only thing they wouldn't do is they would not do any like hormone blockers or anything like that. Like they said, you're too young for that. At 12, I guess, is whenever Lou decided to be Lou. So they're like, let's see how this plays out and then figure it out.
And that's, it is, there is a wisdom in slow rolling things because, it's a fine line to tread. You've got your responsibility as a parent,
Mhm.
and you know your kids, and you know that, okay, yes, you have to trust them and you have to listen to their inner experience, but you
Yeah.
also know that they don't they don't see into the future maybe the way that you do.
Hmm.
And they also there is an immediacy to decision making when you're young, and you really feel like commitments, you don't see them for what they truly are,
Hmm.
until you're in them. That's why they get people to sign up for the military when they're 17 and 18, because you
Yeah.
don't really understand how much you are signing up for. And so I think that all of those medical options ought to be available to people, but they really should be worked out individually between the kids and their parents. And,
Yeah.
it is a case by case basis.
So tell me about your career as a firefighter paramedic and how and did it end because you transitioned? Is that why it ended?
Yeah. It was, so it ended twice.
Oh,
Um, and it is a sort of a complicated story, but I went to school to be a pilot. And I
oh.
didn't really intend to do anything else with my life, but I had gotten involved with the volunteer fire department as a high school senior. And I got my EMT basic card, and I'd been riding with them as an EMT, and I really enjoyed it. But I saw it as something like, oh, I'm going to do it through the summer. I'm going to do it. And I started coming back on weekends from school and doing it. I said, but once I graduate, I'm moving away from it. But I had a job, I had a student job as a security guard, and another kid there, he wanted to be a flight nurse. He talked me into going to paramedic school. So for
Hmm.
people who don't know, there are different degrees of EMT certification, paramedic being sort of the highest. So
Hmm.
it's a generic term we use, but it actually is a legal distinction. So he talked me into going to medic school. And I thought, well, what's one more class? I'm already in school all the time. And so I just went to medic school to keep my friend company. Um, but then as a medic, I really started to enjoy the work. And I found out that if I worked at the hospital at Ohio State Medical Center, they would pay for my tuition. And so I started doing that. And the more I did it, the more I liked it. And it wasn't a great time to go into aviation. I was in school right around 9/11,
Mm.
and it was a great time to be a firefighter and a
Yeah.
medic. Everybody thought you were the best thing ever, and I really liked that life, and I got into that and started doing it. So I was an EMT starting from 18 years old, um, and and I loved it, and I was really great at it. But it came with a number of costs, and I early on developed PTSD, and I didn't really understand what was going on. There wasn't a lot of talk about that in first responder circles back then, and it got pretty bad. By the time I was in my 30s, I was cutting myself all of the time. I had an
Oh,
eating
wow.
disorder. I had a whole range of symptoms. It was really starting to affect me as a parent and as a partner, and so um, so I got help, and I dealt with all of that. And in dealing with that, I sort of created some space to listen to this part of me that had always sort of hated being a man. Um,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that there was any other option. I really didn't. To me, being a woman sort of seemed like being an astronaut. And that's how I've explained it to people before. It's like, well, yeah, everyone wants to be an astronaut, right? Like it's
Yeah.
amazing, but you can't. So you do your best.
Yeah.
Until one day I realized that I could. And then I realized I was trans. And I came out that day to my family and friends, and started transition that same day that I found out. Um, and so I hadn't told anybody at work though. And after a few weeks, my lieutenant started to notice some differences about me because I'd been losing weight. I was a pretty jacked dude. I was 5'10", 220, and I looked like a running back. And um, I was losing weight, and I had like shaped my arms and legs and things like that. And Chris was just like, "Hey, you're losing weight. You look good, Crockett." And it was evening time at the station. We did 24-hour shifts, and
Yeah.
that's when I was like, "Actually, Lieutenant, I have something to tell you." So I went into his office and I told him I was trans and I would be starting hormones soon, and I was going to be transitioning.
And did
And
you know at that point it was your career with them was going to?
I knew it from the second I knew that I was trans, because that environment is very close, and it's great if you're one of them,
Mhm.
right? But if you're not, you're not, and it's a terrible place to be. And so, and it's not a space for femininity. It's not a space for cis women. It's certainly not a space for trans women or gay men or anything. Even though some manage to carve out a space and survive, it really isn't.
Yeah.
Um, and so I told my lieutenant, and he responded really well. After assuring him that I wasn't making this up, I wasn't trying to trick him, because that's something we did. Um, uh, he said, "Is there something else you want me to call you?" And so then I got all like teary eyed, and we talked a little bit more. And he leaned back in his chair and said, "Aiden, this isn't gonna work, right?" And I was like, "I know, um, but I got 3 kids. So what am I supposed to do? I don't know how to do anything else." And so I came out over the next few weeks. I told everybody, and everybody's like, "Oh, we've got your back. We're gonna we're not gonna let anybody talk shit about you. All this." But once I changed my name legally, once the changes started to be more, once people were sort of assured it wasn't just me being my eccentric self, that actually it got to be like nobody was talking to me anymore. And I'd
At
walk
work,
into
you mean like they would just ghosted? I mean, they were just.
yeah, my crew was okay, but like shift change in the morning and stuff, that used to be getting together and gabbing time and shit, and it was just like nobody really
Yeah.
had anything to say to me anymore. Walking into like the little report rooms and the emergency rooms where the squad crews would do the reports, it would just be like that old like record scratch, and all the crews
Yeah.
run away because everybody knew the trans girl from Fairborn, Ohio. And it was crazy. I mean, all the way down departments an hour away in any direction knew about me, and it got to be so I was writing, doing all my paperwork out in the truck, and it finally came to head where my administration above my lieutenant uh, was basically pulling me into the office, telling me that I was making people uncomfortable, that I needed to change my behavior and all of that, and I wasn't having that discussion, so I dragged everybody up to HR for the city, and we had this whole blowout hour-long fight. Um, and what then happened was that night we had an EMS call where we ended up having to restrain a lady who was very, very drunk and fighting. The lead medic didn't want to take my advice, which was to sedate this woman, which was what the protocol said and was the humane and medically appropriate thing to do. Um, we ended up having a little discussion about that, and I thought everything was cool. That's what we were doing. But I had decided already that the stress was so much. I had felt myself sliding back into that old PTSD spot just
Mm.
because of, we'd had sort of a hard year. And I had decided that between those two things, that this wasn't really for me anymore. And I took some time off. And my plan was I had a massive vacation already scheduled, months long. And my plan was to sort of take sick time up to that, take the vacation, and then leave. That is not how it happened. While I was off, they decided that I had behaved inappropriately on this last call that we had, that I had assaulted this woman when I was the only one advocating for her, truly.
Yeah.
Um, And not only had I assaulted her, that I had actually meant to kill her,
Oh no.
right? Because everybody thought I was crazy. And this was their excuse, right, to power play me. So we were a union department. It's not easy to get rid of people. So we ran through this whole thing. They pressed criminal charges on me. I had to get a defense attorney.
This is
I had
insane.
it was insane, and the prosecutor was like, "This is insane. What are you doing? You're wasting our time." And the defense attorney was like, even is this?" And so they that got kicked out, but they still had to run through internal affairs. And this whole time, I just wanted to leave. Right, I was leaving. They just wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't let me talk to anybody. They wouldn't let anyone talk to me. Um, and so the internal affairs people decided that I was guilty, and then they fired me. And I had been there for 16 and a half years.
Wow.
Up until I came out, I was their golden child. I was the person they sent people to orient. I had never had a bad evaluation in all of my time there. Everybody wanted to be my partner. Like I was the poster child for this. I had all sorts of advanced certifications. Um, but my union rep finally was able to get with them and be like, guys, she has been trying to leave. Why are you doing this? Why are you going to screw up her chances at getting some of her pension? Like, why are you doing this? And so they unfired me and let me quit. And they cashed out all of my leave, and in exchange, I couldn't sue them, and I can't ever go back on city property. And that is how my career ended. Was the
But do you
police
get
taking me
some
out?
of your pension though at this point then?
When I turn 51, I can get a partial pension.
Okay. I mean,
Um, well, because my plan was to apply for a medical pension because my PTSD was so extensive and well
mhm.
documented. And I went through all of that process, which cost money, cost me about $6,000. Um, at the end of that year-long process, the board found that I did in fact have all of these problems, but all of those problems were also very common in the transgender community, and that it was their finding that my symptoms and issues were a result of my gender identity and not my time working on the street, and they denied my pension. And so I was like, okay, so wait, they fired me from my job because they thought I was trans because I'm crazy. And now you're telling me I can't get my pension because I'm crazy because I'm trans. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, I guess you really can't win. And so that was how that ended. But then I was out of money and I had to do something. And I ended up going back to work for 2 years, working for a hospital network. And I ended up leaving that. My PTSD was getting too bad. I had developed a drug habit, and it wasn't for me anymore, and that fell apart. And I decided after that we were done.
And what about your partner with the mother of your children?
Yeah, yeah, we're still married. She's my wife.
Okay, and so
Yeah,
accepts everything, is fine with everything?
yeah, she's been
Wow.
amazing, and it's been interesting as I've gone through my journey, right? Because we talk about transition in regard to the trans person transitioning, but really it drags a lot of people along with you. And so as I've gone through my journey, I've I've got to sort of observe her going through her own and watch her sort of realize that if she's still attracted to me as a trans woman and all of this, like, is she as straight as she thought?
Mhm.
And going back and realizing that no, not even close. And the two of us, we've been together since high school. And we sort of, in the 90s, it was the sort of default. We didn't know about being bisexual or pansexual or trans or any of that. So
Yeah.
sort of watching both of us come into our queerness together has been very interesting and fun. Um, not without its struggles. I mean,
Yeah,
it
of
it
course.
is it is a big thing to go from having, like your watch a fire man husband to whatever this mess is. But um, which has
I
been
mean,
right
that's
on its
like
own.
I mean, you had a rough journey to get there, but at the end, it seems like now you get to be who you are,
Right.
and you have your life partner with you as well,
Y-
and she's
Yeah.
figuring out who she is too, which sounds amazing. And also your kids accept it. I mean, that's like that's huge. So I, applaud you for having. I know there's a lot of shit
Mhm.
that you had to go through
Right.
to get there, and it
Yeah.
wasn't
No,
easy. But I'm so happy that you had this good out.
right. And I knew, going into this that I stood to lose everything,
Yeah,
right? I could have lost my job, my, and my family.
yeah,
Um, and to have come out the other side with my family has been really incredible, and I'm very fortunate to have done it. Um, and I just, I wish that you didn't have to do that math when you're thinking about, who am I? Can taking this path that fulfills me and makes me happiest, can I do that without risking everything? And
yeah,
right now in America, the answer is no. You can't. You have to risk everything. Your family, your job, your safety, your money, like all of it. And the fact that people still choose that, I think, speaks to the strength of being yourself, and to the nonsense that anyone who would think that being trans is a choice. Like, no one chooses the absolute hardest way
yeah.
unless it's worth it to them.
Are there other trans people in your community that you live?
There
Where you live?
are. Um, it's funny. I am not close with any of them. I know we don't hang out or anything, but there are other trans people here, and it's a small community. Like,
Yeah,
Yellow Springs only has maybe 3,000, 3,500 people here. Um, but it's a fairly accepting community. It's very educated and left leaning, and always has been historically. So I lucked out having this small Ohio town to transition in.
yeah. Um, and how are your kids? Do they face any type of like bullying or anything in school? It sounds like you said at the beginning,
No,
like
no.
that's awesome.
And it is, there's a lot of factors I think that go into that, and one is that this is a school system that takes bullying very seriously and teaches them kindness and things from day one in kindergarten. It's a core value of the whole system, and it really shows by the time they're older. um, but also, my kids are also really great at being themselves and not being ashamed, and when you own yourself and your life and truly do, and just walk with pride, people sort of see that, and instead of picking on them, they join them.
Yeah. Tell me about. I mean, you have a very inspiring story for people. So I think that a lot of people that, especially in today's, and again, I say this often about this podcast in particular. I try not to get political on it, but it's very, very hard not to get political
Right.
because of the environment that this country is currently in with this president. And he seems to have transgender people as a bullseye that he
Absolutely,
is
he
trying to
does.
hit. And again, trying to stay neutral, but I'm not a reporter at the end of the day, so I don't know quite why I'm trying to stay neutral. But I try to like have my audience be anybody that could listen to it. So, but
Yes.
I have to say, I just don't agree with all this targeting of transgender, rights and care. And I mean, it's just insane to me that it's less than 1% of the population. And this is what we're focusing on. We're not focusing on people that are mentally ill and homeless living on the
Right.
street, or the veterans that have no home. And
There's so many larger problems
there
to
is.
deal
And
with, and honestly, trans people aren't a problem at all. And but I believe that the smallness of our demographic, and the sort of the quote newness of the sort of trans rights movement, even though it isn't that at all, but it feels new to a lot of people. I certainly was very ignorant about the trans community.
Hmm.
Um, I think that those two things together make trans people just a target of opportunity. I think what is particularly tragic and heartbreaking to me about this is I don't believe that Donald Trump or any of the other people who make these policies actually care. I don't think that they care one way or another
Yeah.
about trans people and what we do or how we live, but they do need something to focus people on so that they don't focus on what is really wrong in this country. And it's an old magician's trick, right? It's snap your fingers here while I pick your pocket here, and hold their attention on this small thing that doesn't matter while we devastate you on the backside.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, "Are you telling me that you're willing to trade due process, trade freedom of speech, trade our alliances and our international influence, trade our economy, all of this, just so you don't have to use my pronouns?" I was like, "That's insane."
It's insane.
But that is that is the magic of someone like Donald Trump, is that they can shift your direction and you don't even know that they've done it. You think these thoughts are yours, and you think these people you hate you actually hate, and you don't. And we're not your enemy, right?
It's
None of us are enemies.
I actually, I mean, I've thought about this a lot because I've had several transgender people on my show. Right after he was elected, that when he was doing his inauguration, I had a transgender woman from New York, and we talked about it. Like, how is she feeling? Is she stressed? Do you feel like you want to leave the country? Just kind of having all those kind of serious conversations, and it made me think that it took so long for people to still don't completely, but accept gay men and lesbians, right? And
Right.
it's more accepted now, right? So they're not the target, even though I still
Yeah,
think they're going to go after same-sex marriage. But
they'll
um,
get there eventually.
yeah, but they've kind of accepted, the gay and lesbians more or less, kind of. But now, like you said, transgender is so new to them that this is the new target for them. So
Exactly. I remember that debate about same-sex marriage and all of this, and a couple of things come out of those memories for me. One, I remember thinking, like, why do we care about this? And at that time, right, thinking myself to be a cis het man in a
yeah,
in a heterosexual marriage, thinking, like, why why is this an issue? I remember saying, I was like, listen, if two gay people want to ruin their lives the same way two straight people do, let
yeah,
them.
exactly.
But it's like, but what truly came out of that debate for me was that I remember being upset and disagreeing very much with this move to not allow same-sex couples and to sort of discriminate and hate on gay people. And I remember not saying anything. Maybe among my friends, but not publicly. I didn't write any letters to the editor. I did nothing. And that has always sat wrong with me because I'm not a do nothing person.
Yeah,
But I realized how easy it is to do nothing when it isn't your ass. And I have decided not to let that happen again. And I've made that my quest as I move forward, whether it's with Palestine and the genocide in Gaza, or resisting the Trump regime, any of those things. I've decided, like, I hid out once and indulged myself in my privilege then, and I was like,
yeah,
I'm not going to do it again. And now I really can't, right? I don't have that privilege any longer. But my mission now is to encourage people who still do to not make that mistake that I did. I got lucky that there were enough people who stood up and same-sex marriage was approved. But I don't think, like, we can't do that now. People have to get out of their comfort zone and stand up for what is right. I
yeah.
think most people in this country believe that trans people deserve their rights.
Yeah, I think whenever they overturned Roe versus Wade, that's whenever I'm just like anything can happen. So that's
Yeah,
just
and it has been very hard for me to sort of to realize that my fate in this country depends on basically straight men
hmm who understand nothing about you and don't care to.
understand nothing about me, who didn't stand up for me when it was easy, and now I want them to stand up for me when it's hard and they stand to lose something, and I'm and realizing that that might not happen, and that then we're going into this battle like outnumbered and outgunned with no guarantees that we'll make it to the other side without their help, and it is very disheartening.
Do you have a plan? Because I'll just tell you that my husband and I have a loose plan if things get really bad here. I don't know if you watch The Handmaid's Tale.
I don't, but I am familiar with it.
Yeah. So, and it's crazy that this woman, Margaret Atwood, wrote this book way before
Yeah,
any
long ago.
long ago, maybe in the 80s. And the new season is on, and whenever you watch it, it's very chilling because it almost feels like that's where we're headed in some ways, to this
Yeah,
land called Gilead where women have very little rights. There's obviously no gay or trans people at all. People of color have zero rights, and it's the straight white male cis culture is basically what it is. So people have, as part of this, people have escaped to Canada. And
hmm,
so I live in Boston, and so we're not so super far from Canada. But we do have a plan that if at some point we need to grab our shit and what we would need to keep that's
yeah,
personal to us and just leave.
yeah, and it's something that we've talked about here a lot, and I also have a loose plan for that. But the problem for me is that I got three kids, and there is no there is no way that this doesn't upend and destroy what they have going on. And it breaks my heart because they're thriving. They're doing so well here.
Mhm.
And the options are we all flee as a unit. And then what? We don't have any jobs, we don't have any money, they don't have school, we've got no family outside of America. Um, and and so then what? Or I leave on my own, and I have a place to go. I have someone to stay with. I have someone who's even willing to marry me and get me into Canada. But that means I have to get divorced. That means I have to leave everyone behind. And even if, down the road I can fight through these things and get my status changed and get my kids up, by the time I do that, they won't be kids. And and I won't be married by the time we're all back together. We won't be together.
Yeah.
And and so, I'm but the option is if it gets worse. And I think if it gets worse, it will get worse very quickly. And then what do you do? Like, I don't want to be rounded up. I don't want to be imprisoned. I don't, and, but I'll die before I go back in the closet.
Yeah.
So it's, you're faced with a situation where all of your outcomes, except victory, are bad. And then you're back to this thing. It's like, I can't win without my allies, and I don't have enough.
I mean, I think I think luckily on our side is that people are starting to wake up.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm not going to call out any of my friends that supported him during both his first term and this term, but I do have one friend in particular that was a huge, huge Republican Trumper, and now I just found out 2 weeks ago that she no longer supports him for many reasons.
It is happening.
It
I
is
worry
happening.
I worry that it's so my concern is that it at this point we're sort of relying on Congress. And I think that we have the wrong idea when we think about Congress. We sort of look to them as leadership, and they're not leaders. They're professional followers,
hmm
right? They're supposed to be professionally following us, but they don't always. And that is the power of these protests, though. I think when they see that the tide is turning, that people don't want this, that they want this to stop, then maybe then they'll step in, and that is our hope. But I worry that, it's great that people are not supporting Trump anymore and that they're leaving it, but they already voted. It
Yeah.
might be too late. It
Uh,
really might be. And that is my big concern. And that's why I've stayed so active with some of these different projects and trying to get the word out through my art and my writing and various things to do what I can do to at least go down fighting.
yeah. So tell me about your art. And so you do art, you perform poetry, you're speaking at women's rights groups. Tell me about all that. I
So
think that's important to like express yourself and get the word out.
it is wild because I grew up in a family of artists, and as a sort of rebellious person, that meant that to be a rebel in a family of artists, you sort of have to reject art. And I stayed away from art purposefully. I appreciated it. I liked museums and things, but I never made anything until my PTSD got so bad that I just had these urges. I couldn't not make art,
Mhm.
but I didn't know how to do anything. And so I taught myself. And then when I lost my job at the fire department, and I was thinking, that had been me for so long. That's the sort of job that you are. You are a paramedic.
Yeah.
And without that, I was like, well, what will I do? I was only 41 at the time. And so, like, what do you do? And I thought, well, you make art and you write. You're an artist. You're a writer, and you're going to start sharing that with the world. And that's what I did. I started putting on social media, and little by little, I got my own newspaper column. I started getting invited on podcasts or speaking events, and it was crazy because I was a person who never shared anything about myself. I was very private, very secretive. But after coming out, after seeing the power of being yourself, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't hide anymore, and I wouldn't be afraid, and I wouldn't be ashamed anymore. And that was so wildly freeing. Then that all of a sudden I was the person who could do this now. I
Mm.
could stand in front of 1,000 people and read poetry. I can do this. And 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 now that's what I do. And I've always tried to do it with, yes, I want to tell my story. I want to express myself, and that is primarily what my art is. But the larger message behind it is that you should express yourself too, and you shouldn't be ashamed of yourself either. And once you discover your voice, then you have an obligation to use it to help other people.
Yeah. I mean, you have such an inspiring story, and I'm so happy that I got to talk with you. And I think it's fantastic that when you go out there, and I think you should just, hopefully, you do take a moment whenever you go out and you speak to these women, and you're speaking your poetry and doing your art, that it's brave, and that you could be just helping, even if you helped one person in the audience. Like you should really stop sometimes and think about that, because I think it's really courageous.
And that has been what keeps me going, because you're a creator. You probably know this feeling of putting in all this work and being like, is anybody even listening? Does
Yeah.
anybody care? Right? And I will fall into that sort of thinking, and then I will get a message from somebody telling them, well, I'm doing this because of you, or I heard this and it inspired me to do XYZ, or just saying thank you. And I don't know if people realize how powerful that is to
Yeah.
someone who is sort of standing in the public, but I get that sort of thing all the time, and my work is not for everyone, but the people it connects with, they really seem to connect with it, and it keeps me doing
Tell me about the documentary that you're working on, or somebody's
it.
working for
So
you.
so my aunt Catherine Zimmerman is a filmmaker, and she's sort of a retired filmmaker. She'd spent a lot of times doing freelance work for journalist outlets like 60 Minutes and things, and she'd
Mhm.
done her own work, usually like, making films about environmentalism and things like that. But she had sort of stopped doing that. I mean, she's in her 70s. But when I came out, she realized that she knew nothing about trans people. And if she didn't know anything, then probably other people didn't, and she had an idea
Hmm.
to make a film. And originally it was going to be sort of that journalistic feel, follow a couple of trans people, learn about transition, and call it a day. And she asked if I wanted to be a part of that. And I said yes. And in my mind, though, I was thinking, that story has been done, right? That isn't what we need. We need something that is very raw, very personal, something that tells a trans story in a way that other people haven't heard it. And so I sort of started tailoring the stuff I was giving back to her because she gave me a just a phone to do like video diaries with. And what I did is just started making them very intimate and very open, talking about my self injury, talking about all these things, crying on camera, doing, and it wasn't long before she was like, "This is what we need to do." And she sort of scrapped everyone else, and it's has just been following me for 4 years now,
Wow.
through what has been a crazy time. I mean, it just at some point she was like, "Okay, I have to stop. This has to be just a section of your story because it keeps getting wilder and wilder." But and so that is the film. It's going to be called just Iden, right? And it's just me and my family over the last few years going from that journey with the fire department up to my art and my activism and everything in between.
When did she stop filming? Like, was it
She,
before Trump?
there's always like doing like some little pickup shots, but I would
Okay.
say that I want to say that the 2024 is
Okay.
really when she was really like, okay, we have enough, and to do that. Um, and yeah, it is. I mean, she's finishing up the editing now, and I am not sure exactly her plans for release. I know that she wants to make the round with the festivals, but I think the timing and everything she hasn't quite worked out. But sometime this late summer, early fall, this will be out, and it's a terrifying time, right? Because what a terrible time to be an even more visible trans person. But at the same time, I think this is a piece of work that is needed,
Yeah.
and a story that it needs told, and just a perspective. I don't have celebrity friends. I'm not a model or an actress or any. I'm just a parent, right? I'm just trying to figure my life out, and I'm trans,
Yeah.
and I think that's what people haven't been seeing.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think
hope
that's
that it
great.
makes a difference. I hope that it leads to a lot more opportunities for me to speak and be out there, but at the same time, I'm terrified that it will lead to a lot more opportunities for me to speak and be out there.
Yeah. I think it's brave and I think it's awesome. And if you want to come back on and promote that, or if your aunt wants to come back on and promote it when it's going through the festivals, I'm happy to have you back. I mean,
Oh, I'm sure we will take you up on it.
I am, yeah, I mean, I think you're just incredibly inspiring. I think you're incredibly brave. We need more people like you that can be themselves and show how happy you can be being yourself. And I just think it's really amazing. I'm so happy. If people want to find out more about you, where would they go?
So I have an Instagram. It is at my name is Iden with underscores between the words. I have a website, mynameisiden.com.
Okay.
Um, my newspaper column is my name is Iden. I think people are getting the pattern there. All of my social media is under my name is Iden. So type that into your search, type Iden Crockett into your search, and you'll find my different podcasts, YouTube videos, and my artwork. I sort of stopped posting art on Instagram as a rule, to sort of resist censorship. And what I do now is I share it through like an e-magazine newsletter that I put
Okay.
out every other month to people on my mailing list. So that's
Can I
another way
sign
to
up on
do
your
it.
wapsite for that?
Yes, absolutely. There's a link on my website. The magazine is called Trigger Warning, and if you just click on that, it shows you how to sign up on there. And also, every back issue is available for free. I'm in the process of making all of my poetry collections available for free as PDFs on my website, which has been a monumental task because I have three that I'd previously published, but I have maybe a total of six or seven that I'm working on putting up
Yeah.
and giving away for free. And so if you just get to my website, there's all kinds of content there for people. And the idea is I just want to share it.
Yeah.
Like that's been the whole point this whole time.
Well, you're amazing, and I'm so happy you were a guest on my show. So please go and check out her website, check out her Instagram. I followed her today or last night, and I would love to have you back on whenever you're ready to talk about the documentary and bring your aunt with her. You know,
It
we'll
would
talk to you
be
both.
it would be an absolute pleasure. Zach, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Everybody, be sure to subscribe and give us a comment on what you think about this episode. And thanks for being on. Thanks, everybody.
Not everyone understands house music. It's a spiritual thing, a body thing, a soul thing. A soul thing. Not everyone understands house music.